Food. We like it. We want it. We need it. It's vital to how we grow, how we live, and critical to how we learn. But for thousands of college students, food comes at too high a cost.
Some students are going to college and they wake up and they can focus on their schooling, on extracurricular activities, and on graduating. That is the most privileged college experience right now. But too many of us, in some areas, the majority of us, we don't get that privileged experience.
It's a number that definitely keeps me up, that a third of students are potentially worrying about where they're going to find their next meal.
Food insecurity amongst college students is not a new issue. Educators have been hearing anecdotal evidence about it for years. But it's a topic that's now being measured as community organizers and researchers across the country are opening dialogue and rigorously tracking the issue.
When something is happening at the scale that like between 30 to 40% of students across the country are experiencing hunger at community college, state schools, research universities, that's a systemic issue. There's a relationship between the students who are experiencing basic needs challenges, right? Hunger and housing and so on and so forth. Their persistence rates, their GPA rates, and their completion rates are all lower compared to the students that had their basic needs met.
Well, cost of living has gone up, the cost of housing, and students feel that. So there's this assumption that, you'll just live with your parents rent-free. That's definitely not always the case. A lot of students are experiencing actually homelessness because they don't have a stable housing. And so that's a whole other dimension of where the ability to find nutritious and affordable food comes into play.
Our national financial aid support for college students is at a 4-decade purchasing power low. Money decisions were made, money went to priorities, and public higher education was not a priority through the recession and the recovery. And now we have the COVID economy and the COVID negative impact. So we're actually going away rather than catching up to where we used to be.
Although the brain makes up only 2% of our body weight, it burns more than 20% of the calories we take in, as much as the skeletal muscles in your body combined. When we're hungry, key ingredients in our blood, such as glucose, amino acids, and fatty acids, will be at their lowest. This impacts the brain, increasing impulsiveness, irritability, and makes long-term decision-making so much harder.
If you go without a meal or two, how are you functioning? Do you feel your temperament getting different, right? Can you fully concentrate in that meeting if you didn't eat breakfast and you had to skip lunch?
That's why college students are always asking, like, what meeting is gonna have food and I'm gonna go to that meeting? What job, what side hustle can I have in college that I'm also gonna be fed in? Or like, what are the events and conferences that I can go who also have food and I'm gonna take my little Tupperware so I can eat and take some extra food with me?
We do see differences by students' race and ethnicity. Students of color are more likely to experience basic needs insecurity, and particularly food insecurity is one of those, than their white counterparts. And while we don't think, for example, that being a parent is a form of marginalization, when you're in college, it's often a disadvantage because the college systems are not arranged, right, to address the needs of a parent.
And the reality is that many of us from low income and working class backgrounds, we also grew up providing support to our families from a real place of responsibility and honor, right? So when we go to college, our families don't say, hey, you're going to college, you're like absolved of those responsibilities. They're actually excited for us to go to this magical place called college, and they think that we're going to have more resources and support. So they expect the same support, if not more.
You don't know the problem until you start to measure it. And so now we're there. People are measuring it. And now we're getting the full extent of the issue.
Now there is a culture where we are all using for us to ask ourselves, how are we making sure that students have their basic needs met? And a lot of the lessons through this pandemic, to be honest with you, were things that we should have been done already. as a higher education community, but now we were doing it as a necessity. And now it's on us to make sure that they become the new baseline, the new norm that we're putting forth in front of us, caring for people, and in caring for people they will want to be going to college.
Thank you, Vice News, for helping us shed light on this underreported issue. My name is Cristina Alesci. I'm Chobani's Chief Corporate Affairs Officer, and we're here today to raise awareness of college hunger in partnership with Vice News and Swipe Out Hunger, the leading nonprofit addressing this issue. Look, we all have our own ideas of what it means to be a struggling college student, but what we're talking about today may be different than what you're thinking. And Chobani is seeking to do its part. We announced funding for food security programs on 23 schools in partnership with Swipe Out Hunger. And we know we cannot fix this problem alone. So, what we're asking today is that you help us make change after hearing from the people on the front lines of this issue. That Vice report that you just heard ended by examining the possible solutions to this issue. And before we discuss those, it's really important to get a better understanding of the problem itself with two student activists. Crystal Yu is a student at CUNY John Jay who works at Swipe Out Hunger as a food justice fellow. She's pursuing. Latoya Hinkson is a student and Sudie Morris and is already in the process with the hope of pursuing juvenile counseling. Look, we just absorbed a lot of information about college student hunger, but you guys can help bring this issue to life for many people, bring it, make it real. Latoya, you and Crystal work with students who are food insecure. What inspired you to get involved with food security efforts?
Um, as a college student, the worst feeling that you can ever have is being hungry throughout any time of the day. And we're not at home where we could just cook or anything, and we're not allowed to cook in our rooms and stuff like that. So, and then after a certain time of day, the everything closes, like the calf and everything closes, and the few options that we do have is only limited. So the food pantry is an alternative which allows us to sleep with something in our stomach, just in case we're hungry, grab something to eat. And I wanted to spread the word around campus. I enjoy helping people and giving my last, and the food pantry allows me to do both while taking care of myself at the same time.
That's wonderful. So your own experiences really motivated, inspired you, and you're hoping that other people reach out for help if they need it, which is amazing.
Right.
I think a lot of folks who are watching today are surprised by how many students experience college in a very different way than the ideal situation where you can really prioritize your coursework. And students these days come from a range of different circumstances, full-time parents who are working, and even some who are homeless. They're all trying to make ends meet while making a better lives for themselves and their families. At the same time, costs are rising, including tuition. Crystal, talk to us about some of the biggest misconceptions about college student hunger.
Yeah, I think by far the biggest misconception about student hunger is the fact that it exists at all. I think there's a lot of ideas about what a college student looks like and what hunger looks like, and in our heads, those images don't mesh together. But in reality, students are experiencing food insecurity. It is a barrier to education, and it makes it very difficult for students to stay in school and then to do well when they're in school. Hunger does not look any one way, and students can feel very afraid or don't feel worthy of speaking up. We don't really know how to ask for help, I think, and there's kind of this idea that there's always someone who's like hungrier than us, who's worse off, and we're lucky to be able to go to school, which is all true, but at the same time, experiencing hunger is very real, and it is going to be a barrier to you doing well in your classes, being able to stay in school, and getting help doesn't mean that you're taking something directly away from someone else. So having the idea that as a student, if you're experiencing something like hunger, something difficult, it is okay to reach out, to ask for help.
That's so important because I feel like sometimes it just doesn't feel right to ask for for help. And on that note, I do want to talk about mental health, Crystal, as a student. Explain what being food insecure feels like when you're juggling all the other pressures that come with going to college.
Yeah, I think facing hunger as a student feels, I mean, it's a huge, big feeling. It's a messy feeling, but I think in a few words, overwhelming and isolating are really good descriptors because, it's not just hunger that you're facing. With hunger probably comes, money is going to be a worry. Of course, that's why hunger is a worry. You're also struggling with classes and work and your families. The traditional college student isn't just going to classes anymore. We're all working, I think, taking care of our families as well. So everyone's really stretched thin. So that's where that overwhelm comes in. And in terms of isolation, this isn't an issue that I think anyone feels okay to talk about. Again, that asking for help component. So like in that way, it is very isolating. You don't feel like everyone else is going through the same thing. And at Swipe Out Hunger, I've worked to connect New York students to SNAP, which is a food benefits program. And a lot of the students that I spoke to had similar stories where they were going through some difficult things. I mean, the pandemic, right? Everybody's working, has classes, their family might be having health issues or financial issues, and everyone felt very alone. When I was talking to them, it was different people, but all these really similar messages of like, sorry, I couldn't get back to you. I don't know how to deal with this right now. I'm feeling very overwhelmed. And well, I was speaking to all these different students with such different lives. There was very much so the same theme of feeling like you couldn't handle everything, not sure who to reach out to, and feeling like it was just you that was going through this, which is why I think it's so important to talk about this issue so students know, you're not alone and they're not kind of just keeping it all inside and letting that kind of worry them and affect their own mental health and their studies.
I think that's such a great point that there are a lot more similarities among a certain college demographic than you think. You think you're out there all alone, but you're really not. And there are resources available. Latoya, if you could go to your college leadership and you want them to know, you want to explain to them your experience with the students that you've worked with, what is the one or the two things that you really want them to know? What else? You mentioned a food pantry, but what other resources could they make available to students?
Um, Many students need help, but they wouldn't ask for it, or they just don't know who to ask for help. And as an RA, I experienced this firsthand. A lot of the times, they won't tell me exactly what's going on or what's bothering them until I ask them 2 or 3 times. So having different resources and offering help and alternative makes a huge difference, as opposed to waiting for someone to speak up. So
Did you have someone who helped you speak up and find your voice on this?
Um, no, I honestly just found it for myself, and when I found it for myself, I decided to just spread the word for everybody else. I was just walking through campus and I saw the pantry. I made good use of it, and I've helped other people. So I'm like, why don't I just do it for everybody, not just a few? Everybody gets the same opportunity that I did. Not everybody just outgoing like me, so I'd rather help everybody else.
Um, So the pandemic has changed a lot in the way that we communicate, even. We're doing everything virtually, and there was certainly a big downside from the pandemic because everyone does feel more isolated without in person gatherings. But there was an upside to it in the sense that people are communicating faster and more deliberately over the phone, over text message, Zoom. I mean, talk to me, Crystal, about maybe some of the positives that have come out of being in the pandemic and how maybe you've been able to get the word out about resources effectively via virtual channels and not physical ones.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely a great point. I think at Swipe Out Hunger, when I was working to connect students to SNAP, we first had to get the word out about the program, that there was this program where students like myself were able to reach out directly to other students, peer to peer support, and help them get connected to SNAP, help them learn about other programs that were helpful. And all of this outreach that we did, how we spread the word about this was totally virtual, which I think we hadn't really experienced before. I think a lot of the students like myself that were doing this outreach were used to doing it in person. So I guess an upside of this was that, I'm reaching out to school administrators, some higher ups, and previously I probably would have had to knock on some doors, make some calls, walk into offices, which is very scary. Walking into an office that you've never been to before, and there's like a big heavy door and a name tag, So now you're just sending an email, which is a lot easier. And it's a little bit easier to send those follow up replies as opposed to like having to go in person to knock again on the door and having to like give them another slip of paper. So it was a little easier in that sense to spread the word. And, we also made use of social media as well. We definitely explored every channel that we could to get the word out to students. And I think because of the fact that we're remote, we were a little bit more aggressive on social media, which luckily I think my generation students are more comfortable using. So it was an upside in that sense.
And what, Crystal, just wrap this up for us. What can colleges do better to either make students come forward and more comfortable talking about the challenges they have and then seeking help, or what programs can they start in the campus or virtually in the community, in the student body community? What else can colleges do?
Yeah, so, a big thing about colleges addressing this issue is going to be about awareness. As we mentioned earlier, in some ways, there's not a lot of awareness that college student hunger is a thing, and getting that kind of addressing the stigma, I think, first is a really big component because students, even if there is help, they're not going to really know that that help is for them. They're like, oh, that's for somebody else. That's for somebody who's really struggling. I'm just going through this smaller thing, or, it doesn't, there's a disconnect there. So I think addressing the stigma, getting the word out, normalizing is a really big part. And I know that peer programs, like peer-to-peer support programs, like the one that I was involved in with Swipe Out Hunger, have a big part to play in that because students organically, we already have relationships with our classmates. We're already asking each other, like, hey, have you tried out like the writing center? Was it useful to you? Did you go to whatever office? We always like scope it out before we actually go talk to the adults, I guess. So using those like peer-to-peer connections, I think can be really helpful. And I think schools are noticing that a little bit more. School food pantries, also campus food pantries, are very helpful to get food to students immediately. So students are going to need food for dinner tonight or this week, and that's a good way to make use of that. And I think a lot of schools are realizing that as well. We also see a lot of programs at schools where they do have a representative that helps connect students to SNAP, helps them look into other resources, which has been really helpful and it's really good. I think it's really motivating as well to have a student be guided by another student or be supported by another student or administrative staff to have someone directly there.
Thank you, Crystal. Latoya, final question to you. I really want to drive home this point of what college student hunger looks like and what it feels like. Help people understand what the impact of being hungry is on your schoolwork and your student life. And, take us through the spectrum of the cases that you've seen in your own experience helping your colleagues.
College is already a stressful place, and being hungry is just another stressful thing that's put on your plate. So when we're hungry, it's like going to class, you can't really focus because you have your belly growling and you have headaches. It comes with a lot of extra things and it makes us hard to focus in class. And even then, when we come back home, it's not like we're looking forward to a meal if you don't have one. You're still dwelling on the fact that it's not available to you, which is also another stressor. So I just feel like being hungry alone is just, it's not, nobody ever wants to be hungry. And especially in college, because it's already hard. It's a new environment. It's a new change. We have to focus, and we can't when we're hungry. So.
Okay. Latoya, thank you. Crystal, thank you for helping us better understand this issue. Now we're going to hear from a couple of people who are very passionate about fighting hunger, Chobani's Peter McGuinness and TV producer Phil Rosenthal.
Hi, my name is Peter McGuinness, President and COO of Chobani. We believe good food for all is a right, not a privilege. In 2019, we found out about lunch shaming, and it really kind of hit us hard. And we dove in to try and help and raise a lot of awareness and money and investment to help eradicate this. And kids were being shamed because their parents couldn't afford to buy them a hot meal in school. And so they were given cold jelly sandwiches, which stigmatized them. And it's hard enough to be in school. It's hard enough to learn. It's hard enough to fit in. Never mind being traumatized and stigmatized based on your parents' ability to provide you with a hot lunch or not. It's inhumane, it's un-American, it's simply not right. And so now we came across another big issue in America, food insecurity among college folks. 1 in 3 are food insecure. 1 in 3. A third of everyone going to college is food insecure. It just doesn't make any sense. We got to all come together. And the private sector can't do it alone, school institutions can't do it alone, and the public sector can't do it alone. Public, private sectors, along with great companies like Swipe Out Hunger, together I think can make a huge impact. Since the pandemic started, we've donated close to 10 million products in communities in and around our offices and our factories, and all across America, food banks all across America. And we're proud of that. And if we all do our part, I know we can make a huge impact. And that's really the spirit of this summit and why we're all here today, to end hunger in America and make the biggest impact as fast as possible.
Hi there, this is Phil Rosenthal. You might know me as the creator of Everybody Loves Raymond, or from my show Somebody Feed Phil on the Netflix. Taking a little break from filming season 5 and 6 because I wanted to thank you all for attending the College Hunger Summit hosted by Vice News, my favorite yogurt company, Chobani, and an organization I'm proud to support, Swipe Out Hunger, which began at UCLA and is now the leading nonprofit working to end college hunger. Their work is critical as nationally 1 in 3 college students experience hunger, and it's a huge barrier to their ability to focus and succeed academically. Now, when I was growing up, I never really had a good meal in my parents' house. It just wasn't a priority for them, good food. But when I left that house and discovered delicious food, it became my priority. And the way food brings us all together. It's why my wife Monica and I continue this tradition with our own kids, and why I believe that the power of food goes so far beyond just the calories and nutrition it provides. It's the great connector. And access to food means we have focused minds and healthy bodies that allow us to follow our dreams, which are sometimes dreams about eating more food. During the pandemic, more than half of college students visited a food pantry. By the end of this Hunger Summit, you'll have heard from college students, activists, congressmen, business leaders, and reporters, all dedicated to ensuring that we can build communities where no one goes hungry. Thanks for tuning in. I hope you walk away with some inspiration and with one action you can take to tackle college student hunger. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter and Phil. We appreciate you both lending your voices to this cause. We're back now with someone in the fight to end college hunger every single day. Rachel Sumekh is the founder and CEO of Swipe Out Hunger. She's the original architect of the Hunger-Free Campus Bill, which has directed more than $70 million to colleges across 4 states to fund anti-hunger programs on campuses. Rachel, you're the expert on how to address this problem. I want to talk to you with a piece of news that we were kind of excited to see. Congressman Jim McGovern and Senator Cory Booker introduced a bill to start the process of convening a national White House conference on food, nutrition, hunger, and health. It's so overdue. The only similar conference that was held before this was in 1969. What do you hope this bill and this summit will achieve ultimately?
Christina, this is, I think, a signal, a very loud noise to the country saying we can't just skate by with having tens of millions of Americans hungry every day. Students, children, it's getting to the point where our health crisis, our access to healthy, nutritious food has gotten to the point where we literally need to call for a conference and say, like, we've got to do something new. This is not working. So we're seeing this as activists as long overdue. I think we have a lot of the solutions to hunger, provide food, right? Quite commonsensical, but unfortunately, with our complex food system and healthcare system, we're going to need to come together to develop solutions that can actually be implemented well. So it's really exciting. All 25 House committee chairs sent letters also to President Biden. We've collected a letter with over 100 institutions who've asked for this conference to happen. So it's really exciting to see Representative McGovern and Senator Booker step up in this way.
Well, let's say you do find yourself in front of President Biden. You say that it's simple, but it's complicated. And we all know how important it is to prioritize. What would be the one point that you really drive home with the president? What would be your one big ask?
This is a tough question because solving poverty and hunger is not just about access to food. It's about health, it's about wages and healthcare and so many other things that we see on the table for discussion right now. One thing we can do immediately to help address college student hunger is expand SNAP. SNAP, formerly known as food stamps, is something that millions of college students would benefit from, but currently have to work 20 hours a week and meet all these other draconian policies to be eligible for. So there's currently legislation, the EATS Act in Congress, that if it passes would expand SNAP to students. So we want to see students accessing the resources that our country wants to provide to its poor people.
There's a little bit of a delay, but I think you finished your point. Your connection cut up there, Rachel, a little bit. But one of the other big issues, I think, for students, and everyone can relate to this in one way or another, but the cost of education has been rising. I mean, talk to me about how that factors into the larger discussion.
Yeah,
about students more so than ever before.
Yeah, we see this every time I talk about this issue. First of all, I'm sure there's people who are watching who are skeptics, who can't believe that we're even having a conference on college student hunger. People who don't know that 1 in 3 college students are food insecure. But at the same time, we hear the stories of people 10, 20, 30 years older than us who say they paid a fraction of what students are paying today to go to college. The cost of college has increased faster than the rate of inflation, faster than the cost of real estate. It is just incredible how much more expensive it's become, while wages have not gone up as high, while financial aid has not gone up that high. So if we want to talk about supporting college students, if we want more people to get a degree and be able to graduate and make the best of their lives, we're going to need to provide them not just with tuition support, but support for things like basic things like human rights, like food and shelter. And that's what we're bringing to the table with this conference. And it's been incredible working with Chobani to identify schools where we can step in and do that work.
Now, Rachel, Crystal and LaToya touched on this in the last panel. But, a lot of people, when you talk to them about college hunger, it conjures images of struggling themselves. Having to eat ramen noodles, for example, is what comes up in their minds. Explain to the audience from your standpoint how this is much different than that kind of situation.
Yeah, as I said, we live in a country, I'm in Los Angeles. In Los Angeles County, 80% of our LAUSD students, or students in our public schools, rely on getting their primary meals every day at school, their breakfast and their lunch. What happens when those meals help that kid get to college, whether that's a 4-year school or the 2-year school across the street. They suddenly don't have those resources. So when we talk about ending college student hunger, it's not like that hunger suddenly appeared. For some people, yes, right? If you're middle class and your family's struggling and paying for that $5,000 meal plan is really tough every year. But for a lot of people, hunger is something that they experience throughout their youth and are now in school, whether it's because they can't afford the cost of living in the neighborhood, but they know that they need to go. So when we talk about college student hunger, it's essential to remember that it's something that we've been addressing for these young people from K through 12, and they're now in school. And oftentimes, 1 in 4 people in America, 1 in 4 college students in America are parents. They have a kid at home or they have multiple kids. There are people who are foster youth. There are people who are veterans, people who are returning to school who don't fit into the traditional box of getting the support that we expect a college student to get from parents back home and have a certain lifestyle and story to tell. So if America really wants our colleges to be filling the role of the American dream, the dream that my parents came to the States looking for and college helped them achieve, then we need to make sure we can deliver on that promise.
Yeah. My parents came here for the same reasons. We all have an ideal of the American dream in our minds for sure, especially as it relates to college, because it's a way to move up from what your parents have made, right? To build on what the foundations that your parents have laid for their children. One thing that really stuck out to me when you're talking about the different circumstances of students right today, in the Vice video, I think it was very important that Vice really uncovered another set of students who are actually taking care of their parents, right? When you're talking about recently arrived people here in the US, immigrants, in some cases, kids are taking care of their parents. I know that that's what it was like for my mom when she first arrived here in the US, taking care of her parents, in addition to taking care of herself. So you're right. There are so many different permutations of the college student today and so many different ways that they're trying to make a better life for themselves. Let's get personal here for a second. What made you such a big advocate for this issue? Why did you turn to it in the first place?
I'll be completely honest with you that my journey into this work was, I just stumbled into it. I was a college student at UCLA, go Bruins, with some of my friends, and we had extra money in our meal plans. And our friends were also starving, and we're like two plus two, right? If you have dining halls full of healthy, amazing food, and you have college students that are hungry, why don't we share our meal passes with other students so they can go in and get access to food? We were able to scale that model to over 150 colleges across the United States, where students are able to trade their meal swipes. It was personal for me because my family relied on programs like free breakfast and lunch when I was growing up. And I saw how these resources that my family relied on for just a few years gave us the pathway to achieve the American dream. So I'm thinking these are college students that if they finish this degree, changes their life, changes their family's life for generations to come. And so now I'm so proud that as of last week, we've now welcomed many more campuses. Swipe Out Hunger now not only runs meal swipe donation programs, but we help support hundreds of college pantries, helping them get access to more nourishing food, reliable food, helping them with their marketing. So for me, it's now become this incredible movement of hundreds of students across college campuses like Crystal and Latoya, who are all demanding more, who are saying, let's build a type of college that fits the needs of today's students. Because what else are we doing here if we're not talking about the issues that we're being faced with today?
So one of the that's such a great story, Rachel. And, I knew a little bit of it, but I love the way that you just brought that to life for people and to really illuminate the fact that this is part of your life. Your work is definitely part of your life. It's been inspired by all of the experiences that you've had. Switching gears just a little bit. Now, at Chobani, we really believe that public-private partnerships are one of the best ways to solve problems. And that's why we collaborate so often with our local leaders on important issues, whether it's food distributions or building new firehouse and community center near our upstate plant. Talk to us about how lawmakers, companies, advocates, how we can all come together to really end this problem.
This is a great question, and my favorite metaphor, because it's so in line with our work, is we need everyone at the table. We need companies, students, universities, lawmakers, everyone at the table, because it's going to take everyone being on the same page, right? A movement is a group of people who might come from different places but want to move us towards the same place, a place where everyone has access to food. So having Chobani step in, which is also just like so dope. I mean, Chobani has this amazing reputation as like paying off school debts, and now you all want to get involved in the fight to end hunger on college campuses. So we're so happy to have you at the table, saved you a seat. And being able to invest in college campuses, in their pantries, and then help those pantries in your backyard, right? In New York, in Idaho, in communities you're already invested in is just such a, as a nonprofit, we're really thoughtful about what companies we work with. And knowing that you weren't just coming to the table wanting to get press and give money, but think strategically, like we want to give back to our people and our communities, was really exciting for us. So we want companies, whether it's food service companies who are saying, how do we in our dining hall operations in the back end step up to support students, or lawmakers saying, we haven't updated financial aid in a long time. Maybe it's time to finally double Pell. Maybe it's time one day to give free community college. These are things that would change students' lives. And if we as activists my personal belief at Swipe Out Hunger is that we need to be in conversation. We're able to create much more change if we're talking to each other as opposed to protesting outside. And we will protest. Those happen as well. But you got to have more than one tool in your toolbox as an activist.
That's a great point. That is a wonderful point. Rachel, I want to thank you for the work that you do, for being so inspiring and informative. I encourage everyone that's tuning in today to visit swipeouthunger.org and learn more about what you can do. Now, to close, Chobani's very own Hamdi Ulukaya.
My name is Hamdi Ulukaya. I'm the founder and CEO of Chobani. We are so grateful that you joined us for today's summit. Everyone has a role to play in making sure that our brothers and sisters, our friends and neighbors, have access to delicious, nutritious, natural, and affordable food. We each have a role to play making sure that there is no shame, no insecurity, and no obstacles for those who are needing more than they have. When we discovered the incredible team at Swipe Out Hunger, we knew right away we had the right partner to help an overlooked community, college students in America. Today's college students are a diverse group of all ages, including students who are parents from foster care system, first generation, working full-time, or even homeless. Financial hardships like rising tuitions are challenging enough for these students. They don't need to worry about where their next meal will come from. We are humbled to do our small part to help, here and wherever we see a need. Today, at this amazing summit, you are all raising awareness of this issue. Please join us in getting involved and changing the future for these students. And take a moment to check out Swipe Out Hunger online. Give if you can, and let your elected officials know that this issue demands their actions too. Together, we can make a difference.